Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today and for this very provocative question. But I think I'm going to start with some things that are still left to do. Because if we start with the assumption that automation will result in no jobs, then it'll be very difficult to find our place in the hybrid human technology evolution that stands before us. I'll tell you where people do need things to do. They need them in cities. And I come from Asia. I'm actually in Berlin for a couple of months to set up our office over here. But my artificial intelligence firm is based in Singapore, and then we do business in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Dubai, in Pakistan. And there are millions of people moving into cities. In fact, city dwellers will double by 2050 to over 6 billion. And 300 to 400 million Chinese will move to cities in 15 years. Hundreds of millions of Indians will move. All of these people are moving because they want a better life for themselves, because they want better education, better healthcare for their children. And yet the infrastructure in these cities is creaking under the burden of more and more people. And it's not sustainable. There will be 27 megacities in the world, more than 10 million people in each of them, by 2025. Sao Paulo, Karachi, Tokyo. There were only 3 of them in 1950. So how do we make cities smarter and more sustainable? With artificial intelligence, and I would add with humans as well. Because you can't do one without the other. And I hope I can destroy the myth a little bit here, that at least for the next couple of decades, if not a couple of centuries, human beings will need and very much be needed to work with AI. I'll start with sustainability. Urban transportation drives 25% of carbon dioxide emissions from overall transport. This causes stress, unhappiness. If anybody sat in traffic for a very long time in Los Angeles or in Rio, where the rich are so rich that when they get frustrated with the traffic, a helicopter comes to get them, you know how annoying it is. So how can you reduce this congestion? Well, one way is what Berlin was trying out. It wanted to reinvent itself as a leader in smart mobility services. It wanted to move away from private car ownership, maybe have autonomous vehicles, and allow cities' residents to choose any mode of transportation that was sustainable. So this is a vision. It's essentially like the iTunes or the Netflix of transportation. It's called mobility as a service. And essentially what it means is, and this can be replicated anywhere in the world, that you don't need to own cars. You should have an app, and it should be able to tell you what you need to go, whether on a bike or in a car or a bus, from A to Z. So who are the systems that are talking to each other? You need IoT, big data, AI, you need people, and I'll talk a little bit later about the people you need. This is just the systems that you need. So you may look at this and think, well, you just need systems. That's not correct at all. You need people who make the systems talk to each other. And this is the crux of what I want to talk about, is that any kind of AI-driven system or technology system today requires a very diverse set of technologies and a very diverse set of people. This is the new Smart City 2.0, where all the different sectors and types of people come together and innovate to create entirely new business models. So that's what's happening in mobility as a service. In fact, in Helsinki, there is an app called WIM. And this is an app that very easily allows you, if you wanted to go from here to another place and then to the airport, to book all parts of your journey on one app, which is very convenient. Ultimately, personalizes it for you. Whose work is it taking away? Essentially, your own inconvenience. And it's generating more jobs for people who are doing car sharing. But behind the scenes, the API economy has a lot of different sectors that need to talk to each other. We did the same thing in Singapore. This is an autonomous vehicle, and it's doing exactly the same thing where we're building a platform that personalizes, optimizes, and automates. And automates here is not a dirty word. Automate means that it improves convenience and it improves the amount of time that people spend in high-quality movement. For the end user, it's completely seamless and it's very easy to use. They can search, they can book, they can pay. But here's the most important thing that we have, which I insist on having in every single one of our projects. We don't do anything without social science. And that's just one of the things that we include. You cannot build an AI-driven system that does not try to understand human behavior. And the people who have studied systems of how society works, how humans work, are social scientists. So in this, we have been doing an entire Singapore study on how students in different demographics behave. In fact, there are all kinds of people that are needed for this innovative new project. We need social scientists, because empathy is at the core of this platform, not the AI. We need designers. Of course, you need programmers and roboticists, but you also need storytellers. How should you convey this message? You also need policymakers. And all of them need to come to one table and talk to each other. So if you think about the system, it has automated, integrated, personalized mobility for people, but has also created new jobs for these people. And I think this is something that I would like to talk about, that yes, automation takes away jobs, but it also provides venues for entirely new kinds of things that people can do. And the most important thing is they can't do it alone. So the old way was the government works on its own, more or less. Nonprofits work on their own. Different companies work on their own. Banks don't talk to each other, let alone talk to anybody else. This means we had careers that were very static. And it's very difficult to think of a new career when you've only been exposed to the same job for 20 years or even 10 years. But the good news is this new economy, because it's being driven by technology disruption, is also creating new permutations of the kinds of jobs we will do and creating new opportunities in the process. In Dubai, the Dubai government decided that it wanted to be future forward. But it was very difficult for it to actually be able to create new products and services that would make its citizens happy. So they created something called Dubai Futures Accelerator. And here was the idea behind it. They said, we will give $275 million for innovation, and anybody from across the world can apply. It's a competitive grant. And when you do that, you will get 12 weeks to work with one of our agencies, whether it's a land authority or your tax service or your rail and transport authority. And together, they will come up and prototype something new that is valuable for the citizens of Dubai. Again, very citizen-centric. For instance, Dubai is known for its construction workers. And these construction workers often come from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. Yes, they earn money, but they also work in appalling conditions at times. This is not only Dubai, it's the case everywhere in the world. And the use of materials is inefficient, which means there's wastage. And so this company, Construction Robotics, is one company that is working with the Dubai government as part of this to understand how these companies can build new buildings in a sustainable way, in a way that's safer. Will those laborers lose their jobs? Yes, they will. Should we say that they should instead continue to do what they're doing and not have a more efficient way, a safer way to build cities? I don't think we should. I think we should continue to look for problems that those people can solve. And I'll talk about Singapore, how Singapore is approaching this problem. We are also part of Dubai Future Accelerators. Just last month, we were selected because we said that we would propose a new system called Citizen IQ, again, very citizen-centered, that would personalize services for citizens, making it easier for them so that they would not have to spend time going from one agency to another, but that they would be able to understand, essentially, if they were moving to a new place, where the hospital was, where a relevant doctor was, if they wanted vaccinations for the kids, they could be recommended these things. And more than that, because Dubai wants to be sustainable, to give them relevant information at the right time so that they understand that if they put solar panels, what is a subsidy that they would get. Now, when they put solar panels, this creates new jobs because the solar panel company has to come to them. They have to advise them. They have to look at their house. Then they have to set those things up. So every time we see maybe the person who was the agent, the customer service agent, lost his or her job because now AI is doing something, we see an opportunity for a new job to come up. The key here is we must not forget that customer service agent. But that doesn't mean that we should always assume that it's a lose-lose for humanity in general. This is the app, and essentially it talks about some ways that it can be tailored. So creating public-private ecosystems is essential for adaptive and resilient smart economies. I grew up in a poor country. I think work gives meaning to people. And so I think work is very important. Work essentially is about economic opportunities for oneself and for one's children. And so for me, it's something very close to my heart. And how do you do this is not only a question of cities, it's also a question of the millions of people who are farmers. Did you know that there are over 1 billion farmers, 1 billion poor people who live in villages, and many millions of marginal farmers that live on only $1 to $4 per day? By the way, they're not under any immediate threat of automation. They need help. They're so vulnerable to risks, to pest infestations, to soil erosion. You know there are 20 to 25 typhoons in the Philippines? I mean, I would argue at some level is the fear of automation a first world problem or luxury? Maybe all of us, when we're looking for problems to solve, should go and try to help these poor people. It's impossible for them to get insurance because when a typhoon happens and some farmer puts up his hand, and he has a small land, puts up his hand and says, hey, my crop is completely inundated, the insurance company has to send agents across hundreds of thousands of millions of farmers. It doesn't have the bandwidth to do that. It's not going to do that. So this poor farmer doesn't have any option but to suffer the loss. And he's usually the only earner in that family. Or what about this? Plant hoppers, major insect pest of rice crops across Asia. They cause hundreds of millions of dollars and losses every year. They threaten food security. Yet there's no way to tell people if a neighboring village has a problem. Nobody's interested in helping them. But we were. We wanted to see how we could check and validate for insurance companies that, in fact, there is a pest infestation in the next village. Let's warn these people. That, in fact, it is possible to validate that this land was inundated with water. And we do it through what we call the eye in the sky. We have computer vision and remote sensing experts, PhDs, young students who are helping us as interns, masters, bachelors. They're all working. They're excited. And we're trying to validate, and we can tell using hyperspectral and synthetic aperture radar imagery if somebody is under threat from pest infestation, if the soil is not moisture and does not have enough moisture. These are all new jobs that were created for these students. And then you think about the people who lost the jobs. Yeah, maybe those 10,000 insurance agents that lost their jobs, we should do something about that. But if we kept those 10,000 agents and didn't use the latest technology, then what about the millions of farmers? This is the kind of moral dilemmas that I think we should talk about. I'm really happy we're here debating this. I don't have the right answer. But I know that if you look for problems to solve that help people, there's still a lot of problems out there. So this is kind of what we do. We look at satellite data, meteorology data. We have people going out into the villages who talk to the farmers. And all of this creates jobs for people. And then we can predict if there's going to be soil erosion or if there was any other kind of, what is the risk of that crop actually not having the yield that it was expected to have. So Singapore has also been thinking about this. Singapore is a country that I call home. It's been thinking a lot about what it means to cultivate smart and sustainable communities. And one of the things that I love about it is that it's trying to really innovate on a lot of things. A lot of India is young, but Singapore is aging fast, like China, like Japan. Over 1/4 of its population will be over 65 in 2 decades. How should we look after these people? Well, one thing is one could put in IoT everywhere, and yes, one could, so that if they fall, it would automatically tell their child that the parent is sick. There is important use of that, because like the West, there are 2-income families now. They don't have time necessarily to look after old parents. But what I love about this district is that it's more than just the technology. They realized at the core, when you're old, you're lonely. And the bigger problem was that people were away from activity. So this is a new district, and it's going to be car light, because actually, I don't know if you know, but a number of elderly people also die because of accidents. And it's completely integrated. The students, the primary school playgrounds, the mall, and the old people's home are all going to be near each other like a hive. So while inside the house it will be a smart home, outside the house they'll step out and there'll be people, there'll be children running, there'll be activity. That is empathy. And that required a lot of new jobs that are going to be needed to build this thing. Not just technologists, architects, social scientists, poets. You need people to love and understand humanity to be able to use technology well. And it will create new jobs, even though, as Singapore's Deputy Prime Minister says, what if jobs and skills have an expiry date? People know that we are coming into an era where automation is threatening people. What can we do? For the elderly, they're thinking of jobs such as urban farms, where the elderly can go and contribute. And there are many other new things they're thinking about. But one of the things that I really like is Singapore realized that if you allow people to pursue their passion, then they will eventually find something they like, and then they can fit into this diverse teams that work with technology to improve people's lives. So every citizen in Singapore gets $500. And they've even said, if you run out of those $500, let us know. They'll give you more. And they don't tell you to take computer science. In fact, if you go to their site, they tell you to take photography and cake making, whatever you want to do. Of course, the tech courses are also there. But people love to take the moon cake making course because of Chinese New Year. So the idea is that you have to upgrade young people's and middle-aged people's skills. And they also offer a lot of internships. I advised the Singapore government on this program that eventually became Skill Future, which is we need greater integration between industry and academia. We need to have internships. Germany does, but really with high-tech industries and with creative industries, so that people are at the cutting edge, so they know what's coming up. And people often ask me, should we teach our children only coding? And I always say, you should teach them coding, but also teach them their Shakespeare and their Picasso and their music, because you need both skills to empathetically solve problems. And so here, Prime Minister Lee, when he was in Silicon Valley, he said, we want to be on the right side of disruption. And I don't think he meant in terms of just being an economic superpower. You know, Singapore is known as the world's first smart city, as its best smart city, but it now calls itself a smart nation because it thinks it's more than technology that leads to economic empowerment. It's skills, it's passion, it's kind of motivation with purpose. And so as was being talked about earlier, I have a charity that I started 3.5 years ago called 21C Girls, 21st Century Girls. And we teach girls how to build tech solutions that, well, we like to think they come up with things themselves that they think are good for society, but they don't have to. They can just be fun. But what I like more is that we give them moral dilemmas. We try to point out, if this happened, who would lose a job? And you know what? It's important for them just to grapple with that question, just to have this QBerlin in every classroom. You may make choices, everybody makes their own choices, but you must have a forum where you encounter the full force of the question. And so those are the kind of dilemmas, and believe me, you know, at Harvard in the justice course with Michael Sandel, you still don't have the answers to some of those questions. But as humans who are entering this new era of automation and of looking for problems where we can work with technology together to do good, we must ask these questions. And this education system requires more people. You know, good teachers are not going to ever lose their jobs. You need teachers, mentors, artists, scientists that teach ethics and moral dilemmas, that teach people how to integrate creativity with technology. And so I'm actually quite optimistic. This is our company, based on the farmer platform that we're building. Forbes magazine said that we're one of 4 companies in Asia that will transform the world. And really, it was not for all the other stuff we were doing. It really was because a lot of young people in our team believed in doing something for farmers, and we're very proud of that. We'll see where it goes, but that's not the motivation that we're doing it for. We're doing it really to make income stable for these people. And I think Mark Benioff, I'm a big fan of his. He always says every country needs a minister for the future. I think every school needs it. Every company needs it. And I don't mean a full-time person. I mean somebody who just stands here and facilitates these kind of questions. So I think that my last thing would be, who should be most worried? I should be most worried. Because I create things that machines make. And let me tell you, just 2 days ago, Google's AI can now create better machine learning code than most people. So who's most at risk? I am, because machines can simulate the work my team does. But I'm not worried, because I think there's a lot of good to be done, a lot of problems to be solved with machines. And so I'm looking forward to other things, but I think if we keep our focus on solving problems, and there are plenty of poor people who need our help, there's a lot to be done in this world. And then there's always space. Thank you so much.